What's up guys, TheJordude here, back again with another Shadowverse video. In this video I'm going to be doing something different. It's not really a part of any of my series. And it's just that I'm going to talk about the upcoming nerfs, or I guess I can't say nerfs yet because they haven't announced it, but Side Games has announced that they are doing some balance changes on July 29th. So coming up very soon, and they're going to be changing, I believe, 5 or more cards, and legendaries are included. So this is I believe this is the first time they're going to be changing legendary cards. So it's pretty exciting. I know that a lot of people have been complaining since Wonderland Dreams came out that the meta is pretty oppressive. Blood is like the best class in the game at the moment. And neutrals is pretty much played in everything, so people are just getting bored of the game fast because everything seems to be the same to them. There's not much diversity, which I understand. So in this video I just wanted to talk about like 5 cards that I would like to see be changed, and this isn't just including Wonderland Dreams. I'm going to be going back a little bit into other expansions as well, because I'm just going to talk about 5 cards here. You guys may have different opinions about things, or you might think one card should be changed more than others, but this is all opinion based, so if you have your own discussion, make sure you comment down below and then we can talk about it there. Alright, so the first card I want to talk about is, of course, Blood, right? Blood cards. So the card I want to talk about first is Tove. Now, I think Tove is probably one of the most powerful cards that Blood received from Wonderland Dreams, and is what's making them the best deck right now, or like neutral Blood, mid-range Blood, whatever you want to call it, aggro Bloods. There's a lot of variations of Blood that is running Tove, because it's a 2-cost 3/3. There's no, like, Tove just challenges everything in the early, especially in the early game. You play it on 2, it often 2-for-1s. Because of its stat line, it's going to survive a trade, and it could trade into pretty much anything in the early game. Even the late game is good. Mid to late game is good because you could just weave it in your curve so easily. You just play it first and follow it up with a neutral, and you could just trade into something really easily. So Tove is just a really powerful card. It's conditioned that makes it have higher stats, that you have to play a neutral follower first before it can attack. It's not even that hard to pull off, especially because the neutral package is so good right now. So Tove, you hardly ever have this stuck on your board and not be able to attack. So how would I change Tove? There's a lot of different ways you could change this card that could still make it strong, but not as strong as it currently is. That's making Blood really good. So one way you could change it is that you can make it at 3 costs. So you're paying 3 for 3/3. So it's similar to like Executioner, right? You pay 3 for 3/3, except Executioner does 3 damage to your face. Tove's condition, or downside, I guess, would be that you have to play with a neutral. So this would slow Tove down quite a bit, because that 1 extra play point means you can't just play Tove and like a Lyrio on turn 4 to get it going. You would have to wait till like a turn 5. Also, you can't play if you play Tove on 3, you wouldn't be able to Big Knuckle Bodyguard on 4 and be able to attack with Tove on the same turn. So actually making Tove a 3 cost would slow it down quite a bit and make some more awkward situations for you. So I think that's like one way you could make it a little less oppressive. Another way you could change it is that you change its condition so that you have to play a neutral every turn rather than just playing a neutral once and your Tove is unlocked. That'll make you have to play neutrals every turn, and sometimes you use your entire mid-game turn developing a Blood card, so then your Tove wouldn't be able to attack anymore. So I think that would be fair as well. It's kind of like how Rapunzel can't attack every turn, or you don't have to just unlock Rapunzel once, right? So maybe that's another way you could change it. Another way you could change Tove is just you could keep it a 2-drop, make it a 3/3. It can't attack unless you play a neutral follower, but maybe remove the rush. That way it's not as effective. It doesn't have an immediate upside when you can make it attack and trade over things, especially in the early game. So I think Tove is actually one of the biggest the biggest problem cards in Blood, because because not only is it aggressive, it wins you the board early game and the mid game, but because it does that for you, it allows you to play your Baphomet on 5 and then your Spawn of the Abyss on 6 safely, because you didn't take that much pressure in the early game, or you actually had the lead in the early game. So by making Tove weaker, it's most likely that you're still fighting for board, maybe you even lost board, so then you can't really afford to play Baphomet on 5, because if you play Baphomet on 5 and Spawn of the Abyss on 6, your opponent might get just too far ahead on the board, and then by the time you do that, you die. So I do think Tove is like one of those cards that could really affect Blood if you change it, and I'm pretty confident that they're going to change Tove. The next I want to talk about is Alice Wonderland Explorer. It is a cover girl of the expansion, so maybe Cygames doesn't want to touch Alice. However, I do think Alice could be changed a little bit. She could still have the whole neutral support package. However, I do think she could be, her power level can decrease a little bit. I understand she is a legendary, so she should be good. But when she's played in, and I guess she's a neutral, so they did want to push neutrals. So maybe seeing Alice in every craft, every deck isn't a problem to Cygames. But the community is kind of upset about Alice. So I guess we should talk about how we could change Alice if they do decide to change her. So one way you could do that is simply make her buff, just give a +1, +0, so no health. And that would make it so that Alice is still like an aggressive card. If you're winning on board, if you're curving out, you can still trade up on your followers, or you could get some extra damage in. However, you won't be able to get value trades and get 2-for-1 for your early game neutrals. So if you simply just have like a 2-2 neutral and you buff it up to a 3-3 and it can now trade into your opponent's 2-2, you have like you have a way better board advantage. Or especially if you go Goblin Leader into Alice, then you could trade into 2 things. You have 2-1 goblins, and it's like it snowballs really hard because you get those value trades. So by removing the health buff, I do think Alice would be less effective in instantly winning you the game if you're curving out well. It can still be an aggressive card. Your neutrals can still trade up into things because it has that extra attack, which that one extra attack does make a difference. But it's just that if you're not getting 2-for-1s for all your neutral trades anymore, then I do think that will balance Alice out quite a bit. And Alice also rewards you a lot for going first, and because you have the boards, and you get the value trade, so it's just like too much of a snowball effect if you curve out and you're going first with Alice. Another way you could balance Alice, I would think, is just buffing the hand. So you could buff your hand +1/+1, but not the board. So similar to what I was saying earlier about just buffing the attack, is that you won't be able to get the instant value trades if you already have a board. Then you drop Alice, then you trade into your opponent's board, and everything lives from the trades. So by buffing the hand, normally you only buff you don't buff. I say on average I'm buffing like 2 or 3 followers in my hand when I play Alice on 4. So it's not that great, and it's much more of a slower effect. You do get more value in like a turn or 2, but then just removing the immediate effect, I think, could balance her out quite a bit. The next card I want to talk about, of course, is the probably the most played legendary deck from Wonderland Dreams, aside from Alice, especially in the release, was Spawn of the Abyss. And Spawn of the Abyss, everyone love or hates this card because it's a card that pretty much always guaranteed to do 6 damage to your opponent's face. Oftentimes it's just going to OTK them. So, and because you can pull it off on Baphomet on 5, you can play it on 6, then on 7 you play like Emeralda or Alucard and you just kill them from 20. So Spawn of the Abyss is a card that a lot of people are hating on right now, and I do think it could be balanced. However, if they do make the changes to Tove and slow it down, like I was saying earlier, if you're going for the Baphomet spawn on 5 and 6, you could most likely die. And I think that's how Cygames wanted to make Spawn of the Abyss. They wanted it to make it seem like a slow card, so that you're committing your entire turn to play it, and then you have a good chance of dying the turn you play it. But because of all the early game fighting, Spawn of the Abyss you could play early on, not get punished for it, and just kill your opponent. So I do think Cygames kind of misread how this card will interact with the meta. How I would change this card, because I don't think you can remove the ambush, because that's what's giving this card an identity. It's what's giving it power. And it's a huge demon. Like, it should be like have like a really strong effect. However, I understand that ambush is like less interactive, but I think what probably the best way to balance Spawn of the Abyss while keeping most of its original effect is just to remove the last words effect, and that is that it does damage regardless, even if it dies, but it doesn't get to attack. I think that would make the interactions or dealing with Spawn much more easy, because your opponent could have cards like Bahamut. I don't think they'll touch Bahamut because it's such an iconic card, but they could. Bahamut will be able to deal with Spawn Abyss and you don't take the damage. You could use Tribunals. You could use Lurking Corpse. There's a lot of classes do have removal cards that could possibly just remove the Spawn Abyss. And if they dodge the damage, then they won't just die if they deal with the Spawn Abyss. Because what makes Spawn Abyss is the inevitable damage, and that's what's killing your opponent. So giving your opponent some way of being able to counter Spawn Abyss rather than just like bouncing back effects like Pixie Mischief, transforming effects like Mutagenic Bolt. I just think just giving your opponent more options to counter it is a good way to balance this card. Not to say that the ways that counter Spawn Abyss is effective, because if your opponent uses their entire turn playing Spawn and then you respond with Pixie Mischief, it's like super good for you. Probably just win the game there. But for the classes that don't have those effects, just having more options available to counter Spawn Abyss, I think is needed. It is much more of a smaller nerf than the other cards I was talking about, but I don't think Spawn Abyss. It's really hard to say how you could really nerf Spawn Abyss otherwise, right? Because if you make it more expensive, you make it 9 cost. Baphomet doesn't really care. So if you're going to change the cost, it would have to be like a 10 cost. And maybe that's also another way of balancing the card out, making it a lot slower. Although 10 costs, you probably wouldn't play this card, which could be what people want anyways. The next card I want to talk about is Demon Lord Ector. Ector is the power card of last expansion, Tempest of the Gods. And it's been seeing less play because of all the neutral stuff, and Shadow hasn't been seeing too much popularity, but I've recently been seeing a lot more Shadow. People are starting to figure out that Shadow is actually not bad. You can just play all the last words like Lurking Corpse, Night Attendant, and then you play your Necro Assassins, Urds, Demon Eaters. You have a ton of card draw now, and you have a lot of ways to activate your last words. So mid-range, that version of Shadow seems to be picking up in popularity. But if they're going to be nerfing stuff on Blood, stuff on the neutral package, then Shadow will definitely make a huge comeback, because right now it's already starting to be stronger, and then with the nerfs to the decks that are pushing this class down gets nerfed, then it's just going to get a huge boost, right? So I do think Shadow needs to be looked on, and Demon Lord Ector is the most powerful card in their class at the moment. Just because if you have the board, you just kill your opponent with the +2 attacks on your board, or for burst damage, or if you're starting to fall behind, you could just get a bunch of free zombies and just trade everything, right? So, and you could trade up with your smaller dudes that are already on the board. So how I would balance Demon Lord Ector is either, first of all, I would slow down the Necro. 3 is like pretty cheap. Most other Shadow cards cost 4 Necro for a zombie. However, it is a legendary, so I guess that's the reason for it being a bit cheaper. So if they're not going to touch the Necro, they could remove the +2 on your other followers and just give that effect to your zombies that are summoned, or just zombies on the board. That way, that could encourage people to play more zombie generating cards. Not that there isn't already like Zombie Party and Death Demon Breath, but like the other followers that summon zombies. But also that you just can't burst your opponent down for having a board already, because Shadow is very good at sticking the board. So by giving them like a Savage Roar essentially, when they're always going to have board, especially when your opponent's only playing with 20 life, I do think that's a little bit too strong, because you get a huge body, you get free zombies, and you're doing a Savage Roar. That's just way too much for a 7 cost card in Shadowverse. I think the rush is fine. The rush part is fine. The cost, if you don't change anything else, maybe change the cost to like an 8 or a 9. But yeah, those would be my ideas for changing Ector. The last card I'm going to talk about is Heavenly Aegis. So the other cards that I'm talking about are mainly played in like neutral, mid-range kind of decks, faster paced decks, right? So if you nerf all of those, or all of those nerfs happens and the meta starts to slow down a little bit, then Aegis is just going to be like a huge problem, right? Because Aegis is almost like a control killer. Your opponent has no way of interacting or dealing with it. Seraph, people could play like Odin's, just other big threats. There's like Bahamut's, Alana is for Haven, gets Bahamuted. But Aegis is a card that just never dies, or it's just never removed from the board when you play it. So if the meta does slow down, you're going to be able to drop Aegis comfortably a lot more often, and it's just going to be carrying you so many games. Like, it's already doing fine in this meta. It's like a tier 2 deck, but it's going to be even better if it slows down. So I do think Aegis should be looked on if they're changing a bunch of mid-range aggressive cards. So the thing with Aegis is that it's kind of hard to change because its effect is like pretty simple, although it's really effective. Like, being unable to affect it, remove it from the board or anything, is what makes Aegis Aegis. So because of that card identity, I don't know if you could really change the effect. If anything, I guess you could just make it a 10 cost card. And so by slowing it down by 1 turn, your opponent could maybe play Bahamut first, and then you can't play Aegis anymore because you're just going to die. So by making it 1 cost more, I do think would slow it down enough so that slower decks has a way of dealing with it. And yeah, that's pretty much all I can think of for Aegis, but I do think it's a card that needs to be looked on if the lower cost cards get changed. And yeah, that's going to be it, guys, for my 5 picks on my 5 predictions of the cards that are going to be balanced or changed. Side Games doesn't really ever nerf or buff cards, right? They're always nerfing cards, so I do think all the cards that are going to be announced for changes are going to be nerfs. But if you guys have any ideas on the upcoming changes, predictions, or if you got any more opinions, make sure you comment down below. And if you like this video, make sure you subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. And follow me on my social media links in the description down below. And yeah, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and see you next time. Peace.
朝をむさぼり夜を吐き出し